Well, good morning.
Good morning.
And our guest today is Juell Buckwald, a longtime resident of Harwich, who's going to talk a little bit about what she may remember about what was life like in Harwich during or around World War II. Now, do you remember the beginning of the war at all? Which would have been, let's say, Pearl Harbor. Well, it would have been the war in Europe first, and that's probably before you could read, and then Pearl Harbor, and then they both ended within a short time of each other.
Well, I don't remember the actual war. I was very, very young.
Of course.
But all I can do is recant or tell
Yeah.
a little bit about what I do remember.
That's just what we want to hear.
As
yeah.
a young child, I grew up at the Harwich Fire Station, which was located on Bank Street.
Oh,
My
yeah.
grandfather was the fire chief. My father was station master, and we lived
Oh,
there.
Did you really?
But whenever there was a blackout or air raid sound or whatever, the fire department was the main headquarters for the town or for getting information out. Much different than it is today.
Oh, yes.
My grandmother had some kind of a communication with the fire towers, Camp Edwards towers and so forth, so she communicated back and forth. And that is my early recollection of anything connected with the war. And when there was an air raid signal or beforehand, the fire station had to prepare by putting blackout shades in all of the windows.
Oh, yes.
And they put the blackout shades in, which I can only remember they looked like black felt paper, which they probably were.
Possibly, yeah.
On wooden frames, and they would fit into the respective windows. And then, I don't know, either my grandfather or my father and I would go outside and walk around the station to be sure that there was no light showing, no cracks that were showing.
Now, I'm going to interrupt to say this was an air raid drill, I hope.
A drill. Oh, a drill. It was sponsored by the then Camp Edwards group, or Cape, probably beyond the Cape. Yes, it was only a drill.
Yeah, but we
and
had to
I guess
practice.
the drill happened, I think, probably the townspeople, when they heard a signal of sorts,
A siren,
their
maybe?
lights were out. Everyone had to put their lights out and sit in the dark or whatever.
Or put those similar shades up.
Similar shades, or maybe pull their shades down, or
but
just
no
sit in the
cracks.
dark so that there was, it wasn't
So
any
you
evidence.
were out there with the warden.
I was out there with the warden.
So you participated.
Right.
You were an agent.
An agent.
Yeah.
So that I remember quite vividly.
Okay.
And when you did ask me to speak, that came to mind. And the more I thought about it, well, I don't really remember very much.
Well, you were little.
Little and very little.
Yes, indeed, very little. But look, there's an important memory that you remember,
Yes,
the
and
air
then
raid drills.
I remember that my mother worked at the rationing board. Harwich had a rationing board. Whether it served other towns, I'm not sure. But the building was located in the schoolhouse parking lot in Howardsport. There was an old school building there,
It's still
which
there,
has
isn't
been
it?
moved
Oh,
back
it has.
into
Back
the
off
parking
the road a little bit.
lot.
Was that a functioning school at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
And there was a room, and I guess being little,
Yeah.
I had to go with my mom.
Yeah.
You could do that
Yes,
years
yes.
ago. And she would give out stamps, rationing books with stamps.
Okay.
I'm not sure, I don't recall what the eligibility was, how someone acquired them, I'm not sure.
Well, there was I won't call it an inequity, but I remember from having younger sisters and brothers, there were coupons per person, and so families that had several children made out okay, because the baby even got the same allotment of coffee and sugar, let's say, as a single little old lady somewhere. The people that felt it the most were older women, particularly, who were used to baking and couldn't get sugar.
Right.
And then maybe putting 4 teaspoons in the coffee was, so
Right.
they really, I don't mean they suffered, but they felt it, they noticed it more, whereas a family got as many as there were people in the
Right,
family. So
and
I
I
think
know
that's how it was determined.
They had their little books, and I know
Yeah.
that it was to buy staples at the grocery
Yeah.
store. And I recall they had they look like little wooden discs
Yes,
as well.
yes,
or
yes.
little
Cardboard. They were kind of a stamped
cardboard.
cardboard, red and blue, and I don't know whether one was
Right.
like a 10-cent or a 5-cent
I
or a
don't
5
know,
coup.
but I remember the
You
little...
got your change.
You change.
Yeah.
That. And also on certain days, oleo. I guess it was lard.
Oh,
It came in a
yes.
package. It
Oh,
was white, and it had a
disgusting.
little yellow red dot in the middle,
Capsule, yeah,
capsule,
yeah.
and you
Ugh.
had to knead
Yes.
your
It was
package.
disgusting,
And
wasn't it?
yes, it was. But I
Because it
remember
still
that.
tasted, it didn't give any flavor. It just tasted
No,
like the,
no,
whatever,
but it
that
was
white
yellow
fat,
like
yeah.
butter or
Or like
whatever.
Crisco or something.
Right.
Yeah, but it looked all right.
It
Ugh.
looked all right.
Yeah.
And then I think I probably started Girl Scouts, very young, maybe Brownie Scouts, and we began to be aware of the war, and we had little packages that we got together, like
Oh,
they do
yes,
today,
yes,
to send to servicemen or
Yeah.
delivered them somewhere. We began
Yeah.
to learn to knit. We did knit squares. I don't know what they look
I'm
like.
going to interrupt you again because I knitted squares too, and after I turned in my first square, the teacher said, well, maybe you'd like to work on the design. My square was very lumpy. It didn't go far.
No, I'm sure our first Afghan didn't go far, but we thought it did.
Yeah, yeah,
And
right.
that was fun.
I still remember that.
And then I think there was community involvement of different church groups, women's groups that did different things
Yeah,
for
yeah.
servicemen.
For servicemen, okay. And towards the end of the war, well, being elsewhere, I was not in Harwich, we did things for refugees too, people being brought in from wherever in Eastern
Countries.
Europe, kind of, yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Oh, so you were busy.
Well, I guess that's basically my recollection.
Now, someone
the
else has told
time.
us that they went up, I think, to the exchange building for the ration books.
Okay.
So maybe there were districts.
Maybe
I don't
there
know.
were districts. I don't know.
And then I think, I don't know, whether this radio or a newspaper would announce that such and such a coupon, you had your book, I think, and then they would say coupon 6A or whatever is valid this week now for
okay.
meat, something like
Yeah,
that.
see, I don't remember that,
Well,
but I
I'm
just
older.
remember my mom giving them
Giving them
out, and
out,
that
yeah.
type of thing,
People
so I
signing.
know that it was connected with a ration
Finding
and so
things.
forth.
And you had to have that
You
along
had to
with,
have that in order
along
to,
with
yeah.
money
So,
to pay for it.
and then
yeah.
I'm going to jump ahead.
Okay, let's do
60
that.
years, in 2011.
Wow.
Howich, which relates to World War II.
Yeah.
Howich was hosting, the Howich Town Band hosted a band group from England.
Yes.
Some of the people were from Howich, England.
Yes.
And one lady in particular, whose husband played in the British band, her name was Georgiana Leggett. She asked if she could come to Howich and could she meet with some of the heirs from the Pilgrim Church and various women's groups who had adopted her family during World War II, I should
yeah.
say.
Let's not push it.
World War II,
Yeah.
when London and all of the surrounding area was so war-ravished.
Yeah.
She had lost her dad when she was 6 weeks old. And she had two brothers, and the Pilgrim Service League and the Methodist Church in East Howich and others adopted the Leggett family. In
Now,
particular,
how did they find them? Just was it like a list that they could choose from? Or what?
somehow there was I'll look at my
Well,
notes for a minute.
all right, let's see.
A Bush family.
Yeah.
So, okay, this Georgia Leggett Keeble was 6 weeks old when her father was killed in 1940 by the explosion of the mine layer Argus during the early stages of World War II. Her grandfather died shortly thereafter, and her mother and grandmother were left to provide for the three youngsters. The Howich Women's Club and the Pilgrim Service League was looking for a way to help families in need, and the Leggett family was adopted by the club.
Okay.
In particular, George Leggett, who was 13 years old, and he was provided with food, clothing, and books.
Oh, how sweet.
George Leggett and his brother and
then
Georgina are still living.
Oh, gosh, isn't that wonderful?
And George was not able to come on the trip because of ill health, but it brought back fond memories
Oh,
to
I
some of the
imagine.
heirs and actually a couple of people that were able to witness
And meet them.
and meet them,
after all
and
these
it
years.
provided a lot
Of good feeling.
feeling
yes.
between the two
how
countries, which
interesting
still
and nice.
exists.
Yes, yes.
Yes, so but the
That link, we
that link
yeah,
was
of
very
helping.
good.
Yeah.
Was very good. So
Oh, Well, maybe someday we'll be in touch with Harwich, England again, you know.
Well, I
Yeah.
am, because
Oh,
I've been
yes.
the liaison between Harwich, Massachusetts and
Yes.
Harwich, England since
Yes.
1980. So I have
Wow.
continued a friendship, and I think when Georgina
Come.
asked to come and the others came, it
Yeah,
was
a nice,
like a
very
welcome, and
nice,
yes,
yes,
it was
yes.
wonderful.
Have you ever
So-
been to Harwich in England?
Yes, I've been 3
Harwich,
times.
they call
Harwich.
it.
I know we
Harwich,
never say it right.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
So,
Oh, see how, you know, the goodwill that does come
right.
from bad times.
From bad
Yeah,
times, and
yeah.
they were very, very.
Yeah. Someone else mentioned too that that visited here that the Cape itself kind of opened up during the war to be more friendly and welcoming to people in general because of the servicemen whose families wanted to visit them while they were at Camp Edwards, and there were no places to stay, so
Right.
people opened their homes,
Right.
which they weren't, you know, formally had not done, but that was a kind of a shift in thinking about welcoming the
Thinking
outsiders.
now, I had an aunt and uncle who lost a son in the war.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why at the time, but there was always a flag with a gold star
Oh.
hanging in the
Yes,
window,
yes,
I should say.
they were Gold Star
And
Mother.
Gold Star Mother. And
Yeah.
it took a while to realize what that was
What's
all
about,
about.
yeah, yeah.
And not only in their window, but there were several others in town that were Gold Star Mothers. I don't
Ooh,
recall the names.
yeah.
Maybe Rainio. I think Rainio, Pina. So there are
I
a
do
couple
have a
of
list
names.
of the people that served, but they were the people that survived. That's the list I have of people who did serve and came back, of course, not those that we lost. Yeah, there used to be. And then I think you could have a star, I don't know if it was red or blue, if you had a young man in the family.
In the family. that
So,
was
but
in
it was the
war.
Gold Star
Yeah.
were the people who
So,
lost the boys, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
there were even, in some areas, there were clubs or you know, groups where the Gold Star mothers would
Right,
meet and, you
I'm
know,
sure,
talk.
I'm
Kind of,
sure.
today we'd call it a support group.
Support group,
Yes,
right.
where they would talk
right,
about
Right.
how they were doing, that kind of thing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Is there a memorial anywhere in town or a list of the fellow? Mostly men, of course. There could be a couple of.
No, there
blacks.
used to be a plaque in the First Congregational Church. I don't know if that was for World
Still
War
there.
II or all service
Yeah, just in general. Yeah,
general.
yeah.
I'm not sure. That's all that I can
Yeah,
recall.
of
So,
that.
so
So-
I don't really have much to
Oh,
offer.
well,
but
that's quite a bit.
that's,
That's quite a bit
no.
of what, you know, because, you know, it strikes a child differently than it strikes a young adult. And I'm finding that people's memories are very much colored by the age that they were at the time,
At the time.
as they are of all family stories, you know.
Right,
You know,
right.
well, one member of the family remembers something so well, it's because that was their age to remember that kind of thing, you know. And then how about, do you remember the end of the war, the last day, you know, with
No,
BE
that would
Day?
have been in 1945.
the summer
no,
of
I was still
1945.
young. It was
Well,
just
of
the
course.
activities that were
Yeah.
bustling around
Oh,
at the
well, yeah,
time, and
yeah.
you remember that it had something to do with the war, something that was not nice, something
Negative,
that
yeah.
was fighting, and
Yeah,
we
it
had
was
to have
good
peace.
news. Yeah,
we
it was
wanted
better good news,
to
yeah.
come out of it.
Yeah, and then it was over. Yeah.
Right.
And did you feel any change in behavior, let's say, relief or release or a little
I don't recall.
Well, that's
no.
okay. Again, you
That's
were
okay.
young, Juell. That's all right. That's fine. Well, this is very interesting. You know, see, you have a particular experience that not many people have had, being right there with the fire department
That was
and the
important.
coupons, the
That's
ration
right,
coupons.
right.
So you see, it's very specific, and a lot of young people would have no idea what that was like, and so it's wonderful to hear about it.
So,
So
well,
thank you very much for coming.
well, thank you for inviting me, and I
Okay.
wished I could offer more.
Well, if you
so
think of something else, come back.
come back. Okay.
That would be wonderful.
So thank you very much.
Okay,
for
thank you.
having me.
All right. Jamie, we hope that that. Hello, this is Eileen Brady, again representing the Harwich Historical Society, interviewing people who have memories of World War II and life in Harwich during that time. Today's guest is Bruce Nightengale, who was not a resident actually of Harwich at that time, but came down for the summers, he tells me. Now, my first question, Bruce, believe it or not, is how did you get here? Because there was gas rationing.
How did I get to Howard?
Yeah.
Well,
Yes, I should be more.
my father bought a house here in Howard in 1943.
Okay.
And that house was ultimately destroyed pretty much in the hurricane in 1944,
Which I remember.
and then was rebuilt in 1945.
Okay.
And then we continued to come here every
After
summer after that.
But didn't you come during the war years?
Yes, we were here during the war years. In fact, we were in Howard in 1945 when the war was declared over.
Oh, nice, yeah.
It was an exciting time for sure.
Yes.
I can recall the church bells ringing and people honking their automobile horns.
Yeah.
And I think one of the first things my parents wanted to do was to get some champagne to celebrate.
Ooh,
And
the real thing.
I
That
can
was good.
remember a trip from Howard up to Bass River. And there was a liquor store in Bass River that was open. And they bought a bottle of champagne and came back to the house and celebrated with all the neighbors. So it was exciting.
Wasn't that nice?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. The real celebration, not just, well, they remember the day. They did something about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really
Very
it was
exciting,
exciting. I at the time I had, let's see, I think I was about 7 years old when the war was over. I was born in 1938, so I don't have a whole lot of memories, but I do have some memories.
Sure. But then back to my question was, when you came down on this in the summers, as that I think was what you told me, during the war years, to stay with some family members, like in school years or what? I guess I'm asking, what kind of transportation did you use because of the gasoline shortage?
Oh, well, my father was in the fuel, oil, and coal business.
Oh, well.
So because he had to have a lot of gasoline for his trucks and everything, I don't know whether he was exempt or what the deal was.
Access,
But that never seemed to be a problem for us.
Okay,
So
okay.
we were able to get to the Cape. Of course, in those days, there was no Mid-Cape Highway.
No.
And of course, you had to drive on the old Route 3 through Plymouth Center and everything else.
Yes.
And we lived in Quincy, and it was a bit of a trip to get here.
Yes.
You also had to think about the Army Convoys. Remember the Army Convoys?
Yes, yes, indeed. I hadn't been thinking about them, but yes, and yet there were lots of cars and trucks or whatever they were going by.
And of course, they were all carrying artillery pieces because they were going down to Camp Wellfleet to practice,
Yes.
which was a big Army camp at the time.
I forgot about
and of
that
course,
too.
the convoys went on and on forever.
And if you had your motor running,
So, you
there
know,
was the gas.
if you got behind one and they weren't
forget it.
moving terribly quickly,
No.
there was really no way to pass.
No,
because
they
the
wouldn't let
road,
you.
the road was just one way in each direction.
Sure.
So you were just kind of stuck behind the convoys.
Could
Of
wave
course,
at the soldiers.
but I can remember them coming through Howard.
Oh, really?
And
What street or
they'd
what road?
come right down Route 28.
Okay.
And they'd come right through Howard, and you could, and they were quite long.
Yeah.
And with all the troops, and I believe they were going down to Wellfleet, which was a very large Army camp. Ultimately, I think that land was given to the seashore and as part of the National Seashore.
Yeah, I think so, because I knew a person who was stationed there in my age group after, well after the war, well into our college years, and then beyond. He was briefly at Wellfleet. But now, I wonder why they were going to Wellfleet and not Camp Edwards.
Well, because I think they did artillery practice.
Oh, okay, over the water.
And I think that's what that camp was all about, and that's why they were bringing those guns with them.
Yeah.
And I think that's basically what that camp was all about.
Okay. Oh, I'll have to check with my friend and see what he remembers.
Now, the house that my folks owned down here in Howard was right on the water.
Yeah.
So I don't remember whether we had blackout curtains here in Howard, but I can remember my grandmother at the time seemed to spend a lot of time at night thinking that maybe we were going to be invaded by some kind of
Convoy.
So she would be out there looking
Submarines.
at the
I think there
water
were
for submarines.
Submarines, yeah. I think there was a fear of submarines all along the shoreline there.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to somebody else who just lived on the North Shore in Dennis and said they had to have the curtains down every night so that it wouldn't look, if any submarine came up, surface, so to speak, they wouldn't be too sure it was a town. That was the idea. Not that they were actually going to aim at anything, but they kind of wanted to divert them, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess I have more memories of my days back in Quincy,
Well, yeah,
you
'cause
know,
as you grew, but still. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, but you know, this is something I remember too. That on the convoys, those I hadn't so thought about this. Sometimes there were twigs and trees against on them, so to enhance the appearance of camouflage, we used to look at these twigs tied to the
trucks,
canvas. Yeah.
The trucks made quite a
Oh,
rumbling
yeah. Oh,
noise. You could
yeah.
really hear them.
Oh yeah.
And of course, the soldiers were in the back,
Yep.
and so people would come out and watch the convoys roll through. You know,
Sure,
and
sure.
it happened quite a bit. I
I
mean, the
suppose.
convoys were on the road a lot.
I suppose they were doing a lot of drilling and training down
Yeah,
there. If that's what they were doing, they
Yeah.
had to do a lot of it. Sure. Oh my goodness. Yeah, things change. Now,
What else can
so
I
that's
tell?
one story. Yes. Anything else you particularly want to talk about?
I can tell you that when we lived in Quincy, my family had a big victory garden.
Oh yes, yes,
And,
yes.
and a lot of people, the government suggested that people, it was hard to get fresh produce.
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of families had victory gardens. And I can remember my neighborhood was practically one huge victory garden. And everybody grew their own stuff.
Yeah.
And then my mother would preserve it
Okay.
so that we would have that over the winter.
Yeah.
So the victory gardens was one thing. The headlights. Remember, everybody's
Oh.
automobile headlights had to be half black.
Black. I had forgotten that too.
Yeah.
Imagine. See, you do remember a lot.
Well,
yes. The things that have meaning for you at the time is what stays with you, I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, Quincy. I guess Quincy, because of the shipbuilding industry.
Yes, yes, had to
Quincy
be.
was
Super
probably
careful.
ground zero
Yeah,
if there was
yeah.
going to be anything. And in fact, I went online
Yeah.
before I knew I was going to be interviewed.
Yeah.
And I knew there were a lot of people that worked at the shipyard. There were
Yeah.
two shipyards, one in Quincy and one in Hingham.
Okay. Oh, yes.
And there were 35,000
yeah,
employees
yeah,
at the shipyard
Yeah, yeah.
during the war.
Yeah.
It turned out a lot of ships.
Yes.
And so my father was an air raid warden.
Uh-huh.
I know
With
it.
the little lanterns.
He had a lantern, he had a white hat.
Yeah, yes.
And his job was to go around the neighborhood and make sure everybody had their blackout curtains down. And that and the headlights and
Yeah, to just keep that night sky dark,
yeah.
and so that anybody flying above
Right.
would not find it too easy to hit us. Yeah.
What else have I got on this list? The fat pickup. I can
Yeah.
recall having a wagon and going with my father and picking up cans of fat. I guess the women, when they cooked, were supposed to keep the fat in a tin can.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what we did with the fat, and I kind of don't remember, but I do remember pulling this wagon down through the neighborhood
yeah.
and going up to houses and picking up these
Collecting
cans
the
of fat.
Yeah. I wonder if it was used for
Is it-
military purposes as sort of a base for fuel, or was it recycled and used for cooking for other families? I don't know.
I don't either,
Yeah.
but I do remember the fat, and I do remember the wagon.
Yeah, that the wagon, pulling the wagon. Do you remember, now this has come to me recently in my memory too, that margarine that was white that had that little yellow capsule in it, oh, wasn't that disgusting?
Yeah, because you couldn't get butter.
No. And so margarine as a food product was
Right.
new, but it was pretty off. And the dairy industry did not want it to look like butter. That was part of it.
Yeah.
Those farmers and people said, no, that's...
Yep.
And so it was allowed to be sold, but it was white and it had a little pill in it of yellow
Yes,
food
correct.
dye. It was
Correct.
pretty awful. Yeah.
Let's see, what else can I say?
Well,
now-
speaking of food, let's talk about your,
Well,
of all
I
things,
brought-
the
I brought
coupon books.
Some war ration books
Yeah.
that were that everybody had to use at the time. I brought
Yeah.
2 of them.
Yeah. Never finished up the last one, did you? Thank goodness.
I
Yeah.
guess the way it worked, because this one's made out in my name. I was
Yes.
5 years old at the time.
Yep.
I weighed 42 pounds.
Wow, look at that. In case we need to know that.
And
Yeah.
I guess every member of the family got a book,
Yes.
whether even if you were a little baby.
A baby got one too.
And you had to take this book to the supermarket, and there was little stamps inside, and that's what you had to use in order to get butter
Well,
or sugar or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and you couldn't just decide you'd want it. It had to be announced that coupon number 12, let's say, was
Yeah.
now in action. So
Yeah.
now you could run up if you wanted and get it. You couldn't just decide to get them all at
These
once.
were probably used for gasoline as well.
I don't know if it was the same book,
Okay.
but there were gasoline. You had something like our inspection stickers today. They were the same size thing in the car window,
Okay.
and it classified your need or your use as maybe business or residential or something like that. And it controlled, I think, how many gallons you could get at a time.
Okay.
Because we had to move at one point during the war to get us closer to our school. This was not in Harwich, sorry, but it was
Yeah.
elsewhere. So that because my father had been driving us to school into quite a distance, and he just couldn't do that anymore with not enough gas. So we moved so we could walk to school.
So I guess that's the reason why we were able to get back and forth to the Cape okay,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
my father probably,
Well, he had
because of his
access.
fuel oil trucks,
He had access.
it also, he had some, because he was in that business, he didn't serve in the service because
Well, yes,
he was classified
yes,
as, yeah,
necessary work.
necessary
Yeah,
work.
I'm finding that as I talk to people about
Yeah.
that era, that a lot of the fathers had war work, as it was called.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And it was not to exempt them from military service, it was instead of military service.
Okay.
Especially men that were old enough to have a family, you know, the single men or the just
Yeah.
young men, they didn't get away with that, they had to go. But even those who you would think would be exempt, were exempt from military service, but not from war work. They could be
Okay.
reassigned.
Right. I suppose if you were working at the shipyard or something,
Yes,
you would
that
be
certainly.
someone that
Oh,
would be
yes,
exempt
that
from
certainly
that.
qualified
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Do you want to show the camera what the coupons look like?
Sure.
Here,
How
take
do-
a book
how do I
and
go
just
about
hold it
doing
up.
that?
Let's see now.
Well, if I
Here's
hold it up like this,
yeah. And then now open it.
okay,
yeah.
then I'll open it up, and inside were these little tiny stamps.
Yeah.
And when you go to the market, you had to. I think it
Present the whole
stopped
book.
people from hoarding. It was one of the main
Yeah,
reasons.
yeah. And it controlled availability. And sometimes maybe the sugar would have run out in the store.
Yeah.
And yeah, so somebody else might have been taking too much or
There's
whatever.
some instructions on the back of the book.
Yeah.
This book is valuable. Do not lose it.
Yeah.
Each stamp authorizes you to purchase ration goods in the quantities at the times designated by the Office of Price
Oh,
Administration.
yes, the OPA.
Without the stamps, you will not be able to purchase those goods. Detailed instructions concerning the use of the book and the stamps will be issued. Watch for those instructions so you will know how to use your book and stamps.
Yeah.
Your local War Price and Rationing Board will give you those instructions. Do not throw this book away when all the stamps have been used or when you have time for their use has expired. So the stamps expired.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You may be required to present this book when you apply for subsequent books. Rationing is a vital part of your country's war effort. Any effort to violate the rules is an effort to deny someone his share and will create hardship and help to the enemy.
Look at that.
This book
A
is your
pound of sugar.
government's
You did it.
This book is your government's assurance of your right to buy your fair share of certain goods made scarce by the war.
Yeah.
Price ceilings have also been established for
Yes.
your protection.
Yes, that was.
Dealers must post these prices conspicuously. Do not pay any more.
Yep. No.
And the
no
last
deals.
thing it says, if you don't need it, don't buy it.
Well, that's advice for the ages, never mind wartime, right? They were also, one of the things that the coupons they could be for any product, you know, they look alike, the stickers do, but they would be for, let's say, the sugar, we all
Right.
remember that. Shoes, things made of leather, because I remember my mother bought us all our school shoes one September and then lost the bag with the shoes. She had to go miles. It was a whole day's journey to get, as you just pointed out, to replace it.
Wow.
She had to kind of frankly bring our birth certificates, whatever, because she lost the shoes. And you couldn't just go back and get more. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that too myself. It was not in Harwich, but it was.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
going on. Yeah.
That's pretty much the end of my memories. Like
Well,
I say,
that's quite a bit.
I was only 7 at the time.
Right, but if you were here in the summers, did you play with other boys and girls who were, like, say, playing soldier or playing war and things like that?
Oh yeah, that was.
Standard. You didn't even think about that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You always played war.
Yeah,
And the bad guys were the bad guys.
That's the real thing this time.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, and were you ever really worried as you were in that period, or did you feel pretty confident that everything would work out okay?
I never remember that I was really worried. I know
uneasy.
we had air raid drills at school.
Yeah.
When you
yes.
had to,
Go under the desk.
Go under the desk.
Right.
I do remember that,
Yeah.
but I don't recall that I was terribly worried.
Yeah.
And then when the war was over,
Mm-hmm.
I believe, I think it was announced on the radio.
Yes.
And
And the church bells. Do you
yes,
remember
the
that?
church bells.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was all over America, I guess.
And we had the radio on. I don't know why we would. And it was
Midday, wasn't it?
it was midday.
The war in Europe was in May, early May, and
Right.
then the war in Japan, I don't know what time of day that was.
Well, it was in August, though,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, around the 14th. I think it was the 14th, possibly the 15th.
Okay, and it must have been on a weekend
That I don't know. Yeah.
because I know my father was here, so he tended to not work weekends. So
Yeah,
I'm thinking
so-
that maybe it was a Saturday or a Sunday.
Someday, I'm going to look it up.
Yeah.
Someday, just out of curiosity
Yeah.
now. Yeah. But it was kind of a great relief. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And then between the end of the war in Europe and the war in Japan, there was kind of it was May to August, and of course our American forces some of them were transferred right over to the Pacific, others were, ready to be demobilized and so forth. But there were sometimes refugees from Europe began to trickle in, even though the war, from our point of view, was not over.
Okay.
But they were coming in, and I don't know if any of them especially came
No,
here. Yeah.
that doesn't have anything for me.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
I
all
don't
right.
remember anything about that.
Yeah. I do. I have reasons for remembering it, but that's the way it was. Yeah. So, and then I don't recall. What do you think about when the various shortages kind of came to an end? Didn't they just, the supplies began to flow back in,
Yeah, I mean,
in the chain?
when the war was over, it just seemed life went on.
Yeah.
And things got back to normal pretty quickly.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
I don't have any memories of
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
like a transition period. It
Yeah,
was
it just seemed like
done.
we went on. It was August. I went back to school.
That's true. Yeah.
We went back to Quincy.
Yeah. And rebuilt the house.
At some
the hurricane was
point,
worse. Yes.
At some point, I must have stopped dragging my wagon around the neighborhood picking
Collecting
up
the fat. Right. Did you have to collect tinfoil at all? Like little, now.
That I don't remember.
A lot of products now have a paper type thing, but there were years ago. Even the lining of cigarettes, they were a soft a soft pack,
Yeah.
and it had what appeared to, I didn't smoke.
Yeah, there was a
But they had a whitish paper, and then the paper was lined. Inside there was a lining of foil, and you could spend recess peeling that apart on the school grounds, making your little ball of foil there. And then the Hershey bars. Justified a lot of Hershey bars to save the tinfoil, And heaven knows what became of that. But that was things like that faded from view because it was found that they weren't needed even in the product.
That's correct,
as
yeah.
time went on too.
Yeah.
Well,
I do remember that it was very difficult to buy automobiles.
yes, that production did not resume, and there were not a quota, but priorities, like doctors got them first.
There were a couple of years where there were no cars produced.
That's right, and I wonder what they were still doing. Maybe the factories had to revamp.
I think maybe
Get
you're
back
right.
into it.
Yeah.
I know of a man who was a doctor who was high on the list and got a car rather promptly.
Yeah.
And he took his 3 boys to the beach and played with kites with them on the beach. And they all got in the wet sand, and they got all mucky and so forth with the kites. And he thought, I'm not ruining this good car. He put the 3 of them in the trunk, got them home quick. But that way he saved his new car, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a long time, yeah, before
Yeah.
the cars, I'd forgotten about that too myself,
Yeah.
came back on stream, so to speak. But it must have taken a lot of revamping of the machines.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
They weren't necessarily still making Jeeps or anything like that. But
Yeah. I mean, we had one car at the time.
yeah.
I think most families either had one car or no
none.
cars.
Yeah, there was good public transportation, buses. Yeah, yeah. But it was an interesting time looking back. It was
Yeah.
hard in some ways, but for many people it was not all that hard. It was just a little more regulated, you know. Well, I think that's about it,
I
Bruce.
think
Unless
that's
you
about
have another quick flash comes to mind. That's wonderful.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Okay, bye-bye. How do we do for time? I think it was 12 after, so we did 20 minutes maybe.